the news around the Hong Kong dollar, that's pretty big. How did that relationship come about to get a government to essentially issue a stablecoin on Aptos?
A lot of hard work through our partners and our employees in Asia to work very closely with the government and with a lot of financial tech companies within that region of the world. And I think that just kind of shows the trust that those folks have on a network like Aptos, and where the safety, the speed, and the throughput really matter.
This episode is brought to you by Gemini, which is one of the top crypto exchanges in the industry. I've been a user of Gemini for many years. They make it easy for you to buy, sell, and trade crypto. Gemini has a lot of unique features. They have a fully functional app, a credit card. They include staking on their platform, and they also have a stablecoin called Gemini Dollar, which is USD backed. And Gemini is certified, regulated, and licensed. They are available in 70 plus countries. And if you sign up using my code or link, which will be in the description, you can get $15 in Bitcoin when you trade your first $100. So if you'd like to learn more about Gemini, visit the link in the description. Welcome into the Thinking Crypto podcast. I'm your host, Tony Edward, and my guest today is Avery Ching, who's the co-founder and CTO at Aptos Labs. Avery, great to have you on.
It's wonderful to be here with you, Tony.
Avery, I'm really excited to speak with you because I've been hearing a lot about Aptos. I've been seeing a lot of user data and growth and adoption, and I want to learn about Aptos and what you guys are up to there, building some great Web3 products and services and so forth. But before we get to all that, tell us about yourself, where you're from, and your professional background.
Sure. I was born and raised in Honolulu, Hawaii. A wonderful place, by the way, for childhood. I went to Northwestern for undergrad and graduate school. I did my PhD in high performance computing, specializing in the area of parallel file systems. After that, I went to Yahoo for 4 years, worked on web search, then went and joined Meta in 2011. It was called Facebook back then. I was there for over a decade, working on data infrastructure, things like Hadoop, graph processing, large-scale scheduling, and then ultimately the DM project. I was the Web3 tech lead for that project. And at the end of 2021, I realized, and it wasn't a big surprise, I guess, that we were unable to launch the blockchain. We built amazing technology within Meta. We did all the things right. We open sourced it under the Apache 2 license, so anyone would use it. And then with my co-founder Mo, we launched Aptos Labs, designed to take a lot of the work that we had done within the DM project and bring it to a much larger audience, develop the technology stack for all 5 billion internet users, and support a much wider variety of use cases besides just remittances and payments.
And was it at Facebook that you discovered blockchain and crypto, or was it before that? And what was your aha moment?
I think my aha moment was probably back when I was still at Meta. I've been working on data infrastructure, a lot of large scale systems, scaling out to exabytes and exabytes of data infrastructure, and processing that to support all of Meta's different products through analytics and derived data. And someone showed me the Bitcoin white paper. I read through it. I had been a distributed systems junkie for a long time. That was also my area of my PhD. And just kind of reading through it and learning about the economics of what Bitcoin was bringing to the world and how it could build a secure system through economics, I think was a very fascinating concept. And also a product that, instead of kind of being something that's embedded within a company like a Meta, where I worked in data infrastructure, which was then kind of used as a back-end service to power products in the front end, it was amazing to see a system that people would directly interact with, a database that anyone could use directly, as opposed to something through an interface that finally gets to kind of back-end infrastructure. So that, I think, was what got me really excited about this space, about the possibilities of it, and then kind of thinking about how does that apply. Now that we have this public infrastructure, how do we kind of build it at scale to support the scale that Meta's used to, the billions of users, and the billions of transactions and data flow that happen within an environment like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I look at your background. I was looking at your LinkedIn profile. I mean, spending time at Yahoo, which we would categorize as Web 1.0, then Meta or Facebook, Web 2.0, and now you're building in Web 3.0. What's that journey been like for you? And is it, some people still don't see this as Web 3, but is it clear for you that this is Web3?
I think you're the first person to characterize it that way, and I appreciate that. And reflecting on it, I think I've definitely it's probably felt like more of an incremental change to me, just given like kind of lived a long time through it.
Mm,
But I think the way you characterize it is pretty apt. Yahoo, it was kind of the first iterations of kind of some might call that Web 2.0 still, but definitely early days of what possibly this could be. They built out a search engine. They built out a bunch of different products, explored the space deeply. Obviously, Meta now doubling down on social and taking it to kind of its ultimate destination. And then, with Web3, breaking beyond those borders of a kind of a closed environment and saying, look, anybody can build, anybody can interact. You can build a protocol that is social. I can build a protocol that is financial.
mm.
And someone can go ahead and build a protocol that links the two of us together and provides capabilities that no one thought was possible because it doesn't require, you or I to give consent for someone to do that. Everyone has access to it. All the code's open source, all the code's available, all the services that you and I build are available to anyone. And that's a really, I think, just a novel thing that we've got to take more advantage with in Web3.
Oh, for sure. Now, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. And this is probably a tough question. It's in itself is probably an entire podcast, but Web 1.0, right? Search and so forth, Web 2.0, social interactions and these things. Do you feel these companies like Meta and Yahoo will be forced to adopt this technology of blockchain and make things a bit more decentralized, or will they be disrupted by new players? If they don't change in time, kind of the blockbuster Netflix dynamic.
It's a great question. I think a lot of times people in Web3 are thinking about things, the wrong way. It's like, how do I build, a exact equivalent product to what Instagram or Facebook have done?
Mm,
And I think that you can do, of course, and maybe there's an audience for it. But I think by and large, the customer base that uses Instagram or Facebook, they don't think about those things on a daily basis. They're just thinking about how to connect to my friends. How do I keep on track on what they're doing? Are they focused on the fact that a lot of this data and the interactions happen within a single company? Probably not as much.
mm,
I think what we've got to do with Web3 instead is build new things,
mm,
things that you couldn't do because of kind of restrictions that you might have at a place like Meta or other companies like that, like Google. We've got to build products that are different, that take advantage of the capabilities of Web3. An example might be, if we build a social product and you can actually support payments to every single person on the platform at any granularity, that's something that can be done to today's infrastructure. Today there are rules kind of around, maybe not rules, but there's definitely limitations around something like, Visa will only support, transactions of a certain amount. There's definitely fees that come with it. If you want to pay out to these customers, it's complications. There's KYC that needs to be done. There's bank accounts involved. You can only support so many different customers to pay out to. But in an infrastructure like blockchain, where anyone can have an address, the transaction fees of something like Aptos are de minimis, maybe like eight thousandths of a cent. You can actually have payments at many different granularities, even as low as a cent, and they can be very effective and efficient and settle immediately. And so taking advantage of infrastructure like that, I think, is the key to really unlocking a lot of the value within Web3.
mm. Yeah, it's a great point that you brought up about creating new things versus trying to replicate Web 2.0, whatever it is, and trying to put blockchain in there somehow. But maybe, as we've seen historically, people who bring in new solutions, new ideas, new things that people can experience, something that has faster adoption versus being a carbon copy, right? The disruptors entering in with new ideas. So, yeah. How did you and Mo meet, and how did the idea to start build Aptos come about?
Mo and I met during our time when we were at Meta. We interacted through different projects. He was on the wallet side, looking at different partnership opportunities for that product. I was on the Web3 side, on the DM tech stack, building out the technology core alongside an amazing team. And so our paths kind of intersected as we started to think about partnerships that we use for the blockchain, thinking about how the adoption could be, even different ways in which the blockchain could be used outside of just the payments and remittance infrastructure.
Hmm.
And as we started to discuss that, it kind of became clear that this technology could serve a much larger purpose than than just what DM was planning to do. And we would obviously have to make a lot of changes. We'd have to, develop the technology a lot further. But it's something that I think really excited both of us. The idea that we could build a public decentralized utility that anyone can use. If we think about it the same as water or roads or electricity, it should be something that everyone has access to, everyone can transact on, and can be a global settlement ledger for many different types of applications.
Hmm. And is Aptos a layer one blockchain, and what protocol does it use?
Aptos is a layer one blockchain.
Hmm.
It's our own custom protocol, Aptos protocol. Uh, Underneath of it, it uses the Move language as well. Kind of just for some background, Move is a language that was developed during our time back at DM under the Facebook umbrella. It was designed kind of specifically to support use cases of their mints and payments and a kind of Libra currency that at the time we thought was important. We've taken Move and really evolved it a lot since then. We've added features like objects to it. We've added a kind of fuller support for the Move prover. We actually on this new effort to build something we call Move 2, which is a new compiler, a new VM, support for what we call block STM, a dynamic parallelism, which is kind of the third iteration of parallelism in the journey so far in this space. And it supports things like on-chain randomness. It is, we think, going to be the ultimate vessel for any kind of Web3 developer going forward into the future. And that's an area that definitely needs a technology shift.
Hmm. Have you and Mo gone back to Facebook and, hit up Zuck and say, hey, man, look what we built, this is a blockchain you can integrate into Facebook.
I think I think Facebook has been very focused on a lot of other efforts at this time. As a shareholder, I'm pretty excited about what they're doing in AI. Also continuing to develop their product suite. Um, I, I think at the right time we'll have a conversation about Web3, but I think for now there's a lot of other focuses at the company.
For sure. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Was it this week that it's the 2-year mainnet anniversary for Aptos?
That's right. Well, previous week, but yes, it's been 2 years and 2 years since mainnet has gone live.
Wow. It's pretty amazing. And what use cases is Aptos targeting? And I know it may be across the board because you're a layer one, but are there any particular um, use case you're targeting, like tokenization, NFTs, whatever it may be?
So Aptos's strengths really are in a couple areas. Well, Aptos is the largest scale support kind of within the Web3 industry. I think that's something that we felt was really important. As an infrastructure layer, if we think back to cloud, one of the things that cloud people were really worried about for cloud adoption was in the early days, there wasn't an ability to scale easily to large amounts of hardware. So if you're a large company trying to build on top of cloud, you're thinking like, if my user base grows substantially, does it mean that now my infrastructure is going to limit me on how many users I can onboard at a single given time? And that's, of course, for any business, a huge risk and consideration. I think in blockchain is the same thing. Thinking about for a large company or someone who wants to build at scale, support hundreds of millions of users, and they're thinking like, well, if I build in this blockchain infrastructure, is it gonna, eventually hit a limit where I can't go any further? That's going to hinder my product growth. We felt scalability was one of those important things to solve
Mm,
because if you don't have scalability, you've seen what happens in Ethereum, where
yeah.
demand-based pricing drives up fees. If you have high fees, transaction rates, can't be supported by an application because customers don't want to pay those fees. Applications can't internally handle those fees at certain scale. It's not going to work out. And so we've worked really hard in the last couple of years, and even before that. This project's been going on since 2018, basically,
Mm,
to really build the scale that we thought could support, the 5 billion internet users out there. And we've been really pleased to see our results. Last December, we kind of announced our results of what we call PreviewNet. And PreviewNet is a way to run kind of a mainnet-like environment with the same things, 100 plus validators, running our next iteration version of the software, the code. And we were able to demonstrate with reproducible results. If you want to run them yourself, we have the configurations in GitHub with the same commands. You can go ahead and kind of repeat all this. Um, that we could see more than 2 billion transactions occur in a day, 2 billion kind of payment transactions. And that's an average of more than 25,000 transactions per second.
wow.
So just to put that at scale, in 2023, I think Visa did something like 700 million transactions per day. MasterCard did 400 million transactions per day. 2 billion transactions in a single day is actually more than every single credit card processor combined.
Wow.
And so this gave us a lot of confidence to show, and in a repeatable and reproducible environment, that Aptos is able to support some of the largest workloads in the world, in one industry at least.
That's amazing.
And, and then back in August, there was a project called Tapas Cat, which is a very simple kind of click to tap game, but underneath the covers, it's actually doing some pretty complicated things around voting, around points accumulation. And Tapas had kind of achieved a lot of traction and drove up the transactions on mainnet to 326 million transactions in one day.
Wow.
And so Aptos now holds the records for daily transactions in mainnet. I think the top three records, 326 million, 150 million, and I think something like 96 million. Demonstrating that not only this result can happen in the next version of code, but actually in the software that's deployed today. And so we felt that this kind of ability to show that you have amazing scalability, the fees stayed low the whole time, they were fractions of a cent, are really important for developing infrastructure that anyone can build on and can not have to worry about their use case kind of getting hit by the ceiling of what the infrastructure can provide. So cost, scale, and then latency is something that we've also worked really hard on. Our infrastructure has evolved a lot. We've made improvements to consensus, we made improvements to the pipelining aspects. Something that Aptos does very uniquely here is it has a very pipeline design, more than 5 phases: data dissemination, kind of consensus, parallel execution, parallel storage, and then finally kind of proof generation. And through these 5 stages, we can generate both high throughput and low latency,
Mm.
and kind of drive each stage down in terms of the kind of cost to the users. We've seen that we put up a dashboard recently with the kind of us versus other networks, and showing that Aptos is the fastest for it, typically around 700 800 milliseconds out of Asia
Wow.
for user end-to-end times. And then why that's important is because you have a website that takes about 2.5 seconds to load on average if it's a good website.
Yeah.
And being able to be kind of about 700 800 milliseconds or in that range means that you can actually put a blockchain operation in the critical path of the website loading.
Mm.
So that can be a native integration into kind of web apps, into mobile applications, into anything you do on the internet today. And so the combination of these three things kind of, shows us where we think that the technology needs to be in order for that mass scale adoption. So we work on things that, really take advantage of this. High throughput applications, anything that requires low latency, anything that kind of requires that low cost. I think a
Mm.
good example of that would be use cases around payments. So if you think about, for instance, I was going back to earlier, kind of micropayments, small amounts of transactions, transacting a cent, transacting 10 cents. That's not great for networks like Ethereum. It's really great for things like Aptos, right? Because you can actually move money at high speeds at very, very low cost. And so being able to support micropayments or even streaming payments, where you as a content creator might have a stream and you want your users to be able to kind of compensate you if they think that you're doing a good job, and they can actually just kind of stream the payments as they're watching your show, and then that can you can turn the stream off if they're dissatisfied.
Yeah.
Those kind of things enable new use cases that weren't possible before, new methods of payment that weren't possible. Or if you want to think about things like microloans in emerging countries, those things are very hard to do in traditional world, but they're possible to do in products like Aptos. So focusing on those use cases, especially in the finance, loyalty, commerce, we think that there's amazing innovation in that area that can leverage the Aptos technology stack to its fullest.
That's amazing and incredible performance stats. And as you're saying that, I think about like your competitors like Solana who've had downtime trying to handle things like this. So you guys have not had that issue. And certainly that's a differentiator, right? You have the latency, you have the uptime and so forth. And I love the idea of the micropayments. That is something I've been following for years. I know the folks at Brave browser are doing it in a different way, but they haven't really cracked the model of having the traditional publishers and so forth really buying in and having real-time stream payments and things like that. Um, is that a use case that you guys are maybe working with, different companies with or for?
Yeah, we probably can't talk about it too much right now, but we're working with a large number of companies to explore the space further, and I think that especially emerging markets is the key here. That's where those smaller payment sizes are more important. Or if you think about countries in like India, where it has a very large population, and lots of folks that are cost conscious, those transaction fees add up. Those amounts of transfers are important, and we can support those use cases better than anybody in the world. So
Mm.
that's the kind of area that I think we really are designed for solving.
Oh, for sure. Now, tell us about the apt token. If I'm saying that right, is it apt?
You can call it. I think apt is fine. APT
Okay.
is fine. Whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Yeah, APT token. Tell us a bit about the token and the tokenomics. Are there respective unlocks coming up and things like that?
Sure. So um, APT is a pretty interesting token. I think when it was launched, it had one of the largest, if not the largest, community bucket available to it. I think at 51%. I think
Mm.
it's something that um, if you're trying to build out a public decentralized utility, it's obvious to me. I think that the token's got to reflect that, and being able to support the community through the majority of the token, I think is a really important thing. In general, I think that the token unlocks are probably industry leading. Most, I think the investors and the core contributors have a four-year unlock schedule, um, and the foundation has a much larger 10-year unlock schedule for its tokens and for the community bucket. And for those kind of things, I think you really want to take a long-term perspective on building a network. It is not going to be something that happens quickly over time, and as we've seen in the space, finding actual product market fit is difficult.
Mm.
So designing something for the long term, I think, which is the way the tokenomics of Aptos is structured, is really important. And I think it's actually set up quite well. The other thing is, I would say, when it comes to the mechanisms around the token, they're extremely simple, and that's by design as well. Just being able to have anyone but understand there is a staking emission, and there's also a burning for transaction fees, and that's pretty much for the most part it when it comes to creation and deletion of tokens. It makes it easy for anyone to understand.
Mm.
Whereas sometimes there's very complicated schemes of like some parts are burned, some parts are saved. There's all this other stuff, and like, it's very hard for people to get the grasp of like what's actually happening within the network. The simplicity is really, really important.
You mentioned staking. Is that available right now?
Yeah, anyone can stake to Aptos network. You can run a validator. You can directly stake. You can have delegated staking into your validator. I think this is also by design. You want a large amount of participants in the network. You want people to, I think it's as low as 11 APT to stake into the network. So it's accessible to a large number of people. And the more participation, the better, obviously.
Oh, for sure. Um, I saw on the website AI and blockchain, and there's other, use cases if you want to call it that, like GameFi and so forth. But tell us about what you guys are doing with AI and blockchain. We know there's like a symbiotic relationship where blockchain is being helped to police AI, and AI is being used to enhance blockchain attributes.
AI and blockchain is a space probably a bit closer to my heart. When I worked at Meta in data infrastructure, I worked on a lot of AI or ML type initiatives. Some of the things I worked on were collaborative filtering, which is a way to kind of help, find recommendations for instance, users for groups. I think Netflix had a very famous collaborative filtering challenge back maybe 10 years ago. I also worked on some other kind of supervised learning algorithms, k-means clustering, gradient descent. And so I think for those, it's really interesting to see that intersection now of like the work I've done before in blockchain now.
Mhm.
A lot of it is going to be around the data preparation and the kind of data lineage. And that's something also in data infrastructure we spend a lot of time on. So thinking through that a bit and then kind of finding the right partners in the space has been key for us. We've announced our partnership with Overlay. Overlay is a group of content creators, some former National Geographic photographers and others
Mhm.
who are really concerned about how their data is being used in
Sure.
LLMs, how their data is being just used elsewhere as well. And one of the ways we want to solve this problem is through tracking that data, creating controls around it, creating standards in how that data can be used with the creator of permission. And we're all creators. You're creating a podcast. I'm working on blockchain, and I think it's important for us to be able to kind of start to put a lot of that historical information on chain. You know, having that ability to kind of say, this is my content, I created it, I'm signing it with my private key, and everyone knows about it now going forward because this is an immutable record of history of what I've created is
Mm.
something that is going to be, I think, really necessary in this world of data being used in different ways and kind of without, maybe without permission, without access. And so that's where I think blockchain can really, really help with the AI space. And I think we've seen a lot of concerns from people looking at LLMs and saying like, where'd you get the data source from?
Yeah.
Uh, did you have permission to access that? And sometimes the answers are a little hazy. It's going to be a world where we need to have more attribution around what's being created and more controls around it. And we're very proud to work with companies like Overlay on this specific area.
Yeah, I love that.
Additionally, yeah, I will say there's a couple other use cases that are really exciting.
Sure.
I think it's pretty clear we'll start to see, trading happening on chain with more AI into it. It's not surprising that as you have also transaction fees lowering, and if you have throughput going up, what we've seen in systems like NASDAQ is I think 60 to 80% of that is automated, algorithmic trading, kind of trading by bots in some sense, program bots. And you'll start to see the same thing happening in a world of crypto where anything can be traded 24/7 without restriction. And that is inevitable. And so being able to kind of build out infrastructure that can support that at scale, I think is probably the next generation of where this technology is going to go.
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I've been talking a lot about that the token economy, everything running on the blockchain, and you can have truly global markets and no more holidays or opening and closing bell, no more weekends, 24/7 trading.
Exactly. And 24/7 trading, happening with an algorithm behind it that is, got access to your funds that can transact on financial protocols and with different financial assets. That is, I think, the future of where this heads. And is our job to kind of make sure we build out the infrastructure to support that.
Mm. Going back to data, right? And I'm thinking, well, these are things I've been noodling on. Do you envision in the future we're going to eat individually, our data on Facebook, right? Our activity, where we live, our personal interests, what type of food, yada yada that we like, right? That will be on the blockchain, and we can then monetize that and sell it to advertisers, right? Versus Facebook and these social platforms in Web2, they monetize it, but they keep the money, right? But you don't get a cut. They just monetize your activity. But in the future, because of data privacy, but also blockchain, you can sell that to advertisers.
I think there'll be a world where there'll be a much easier way for content creators, and I would consider it still content that we create, to be compensated, at least in part, for their contributions. And the good news is, I don't think that world's that far away. We've actually working with a number of companies that are exploring that exact route. If in today's actions, if I watch an ad or if I, as you said, share my data for your usage, there's no reason why you can't give a cut back to me.
Mhm.
And with blockchain, you can have, we were just talking about earlier, it might be hard in today's traditional rails to do that. Um, but it's actually quite easy within the blockchain space. You can even have like very low amounts of payments going out for less valuable data, yet make that extremely efficient with infrastructure like Aptos.
Oh, for sure. Now, talk a bit about your guys' approach to security, but also decentralization, right? And how those things go hand in hand.
Yeah, so I think some people think a lot about this trade-off of decentralization and security, and I don't think there's a trade-off here at all. You can actually strengthen both
Mm,
independently in some degrees, right?
for
I'll
sure.
give you a couple examples. So we take security extremely seriously. Move was designed as a language built for security first. Forget performance, forget other aspects. It was really designed, and even features. It was designed like, what's the core we can build that actually prevents programmers from making mistakes, um, and allowing mismanagement of funds, those types of things. And so that's kind of one of the core tenets of what we're doing that's important from a security aspect. The other thing is security is also somewhat of a, I don't want our head of security upset, but a little bit of a boring hard work in some sense. It requires us to be just very tedious around how does code get into the repo?
Mm.
How much testing is there? There's unit tests, there's regression tests, there's cluster tests, there's security tests we add in. There's fuzzing that goes on as a part of the process. There is a dev net, test net, then a main net. There's also something we call a preview net to test major features going out. So there's a lot of factors here, also auditing that happens at different levels of the stack. So it's not something that's like a one size fits all type thing. It's really about putting together a process from ideation all the way to production that kind of checks as many different angles as possible and tries to prevent as many issues as possible along that entire journey. And so it's something that, it has to be really a mindset from an organizational viewpoint, something that everyone internalizes as important. And the trade-off for security here is more about speed of time getting code into production. Because if you're not doing those checks, you can actually push the code much faster. You can have the features rolling out, but at at risk. And our risk tolerance is definitely going to be much more, we want to push both the feature set moving out quickly and security. And we find a pretty good sweet spot, around like, doing a lot of these checks and balances uh, uh, as a first step and building out really strong infrastructure to support that as much automation as possible. And
Mm.
then kind of deploying, through the IP process extremely quickly. For decentralization, we've taken a different perspective, I think, than others in the space. We really focus on like what is decentralization trying to accomplish here, and it's about kind of a couple of different things. One is about the process itself. A decentralized process has a lot of different participants in it. It allows a lot of opportunities for participation as well. So going back to the idea of production concept I brought up earlier, and when someone has an idea on the Aptos blockchain, they kind of create an AIP, which is our process for like EIPs essentially. They submit a proposal, they talk about what they want to do, the accomplishments. There's community feedback. Then there's code that comes in. There's more community feedback on that as well, kind of review around that. And then there's also that code gets shipped to validators. Validators need to kind of accept that code or not. And then there's also another check, which is on-chain governance. And token holders will then vote to make the actual change go live. And so this kind of plays into both security and decentralization. You have many opportunities for participants to give their feedback, to voice support or concerns, and you have a process that's very open. And so this is all really important for decentralization. The other thing that is about kind of the metrics of decentralization. And so for this, it's like, how easily can your system be compromised?
Mm.
For a Byzantine fault tolerant system like ours, we support up to kind of 1/3 of the stake being kind of malicious. Uh, from guarantees of that, we can we can ensure safety and liveness of the protocol. And so there's something called the Nakamoto coefficient. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's the idea like what's the minimum number of machines that need to be compromised in the system
Mm.
in order for it to kind of fall apart, lose liveness or lose safety. And so for Aptos, I think ours is about 22 right now, which puts us in very much one of the highest among major L1s. It's higher than Solana, for example. And we do that with about 150 nodes. And so it's less about the number of nodes and more about like how many of these nodes need to be compromised in order for the system kind of fall over. You could have thousands of nodes in the network, but if you have all the stake in one node, those other nodes do nothing really,
Right.
and they don't actually secure the network. They're great for a media soundbite, they're great for a slide deck, but in practice, they do not actually help the network one bit. And so we really focus on the metrics that kind of matter for us when you think about decentralization. It's really about kind of avoiding, single sources of failure, even couple sources of failure. What's the right balance there? And then from the process standpoint, really making it as open and transparent as possible with as many participants as can be added to the process.
We've seen the stablecoin market is growing significantly, and it seems like stablecoin legislation is around the corner. Are there stablecoin issuers on Aptos, USDC, and all these other things?
Yeah, we're really excited. I think a couple of weeks ago we announced that USDT was coming to Aptos.
Mm.
It's coming very soon, and there's a number of others to follow. Also, there was an announcement of Aptos being, I think, the only chain kind of selected for the pilot of the e-Hong Kong dollar that's coming
Wow.
soon. So we believe that the money movement is of course very important, and having stables is a big part of that, obviously. We're going to be seeing more stables coming to Aptos and amazing rails built around them. We have a fungible assets token standard, which is extremely powerful and rich to support these assets at high scale, very low fees, and very interoperability across the ecosystem.
Wow, the news around the Hong Kong dollar, that's pretty big. How did that relationship come about to get a government to essentially issue a stablecoin on Aptos?
Um, a lot of hard work through our partners and our employees in Asia to work very closely with the government and with a lot of financial tech companies within that region of the world. And I think that just kind of shows the trust that those folks have on a network like Aptos, and where the safety, the speed, and the throughput really matter when evaluating a project like that.
Hmm. Now, what's on the roadmap for the remainder of 2024 and maybe early 2025?
Oh my gosh, so many things. We've been teasing out AptOS for a little while. There's definitely some very, very exciting new infrastructure improvements that are going to come that we think are going to take us beyond what a traditional blockchain can do today.
Mm.
If you think about uh, kind of block the databases back into traditional kind of Web2 sense, you have RocksDB, you have MySQL, you have Postgres. You know, people don't get so excited about those technologies. I think as a broad population, technologists do, obviously, because they power a lot of the back ends of the largest tech companies in the world. But there's a lot of function that goes above that stack before you build applications, and so we're pretty excited about some of the technology rolling out there. Alongside that, I think something we have announced in the past is Aptos Build. Aptos Build is a product from Aptos Labs to allow you to construct rich applications and be a one-stop shop for you as a blockchain developer. Let me give you like a little example. So again, if you're building directly on top of a database like MySQL or Postgres, there's a lot of SQL queries you have to write. There's a lot of infrastructure you have to kind of glue. You have to glue together multiple databases or add layers on top, layers of abstraction to get APIs that would make sense for your application. Aptos Build kind of does a lot of that hard kind of glue work for you. It provides APIs for directly minting NFTs. It
Mm.
provides APIs for accessing data on chain in different ways, kind of more in a database-like format, or more kind of even like through the full node kind of APIs, if you will. And it's starting to add more infrastructure around um, gas station, fee management, custody solutions. We have something called Aptos Connect, which allows you to log in with your Google ID or your Apple ID and have a wallet in the back end, kind of secured with a zero knowledge proof between the two. So there's some anonymity and privacy for you. And this kind of infrastructure adds up into being like, you as an application developer, really focus on your app. What are you trying to solve? Are you trying to make, videos more accessible in different parts of the world? Are you trying to build a new game that takes advantage of the dynamics of Web3? Focus on those things and those use cases, and the glue is going to all be there for you to just integrate a blockchain. You don't have to hire 10 blockchain engineers and smart contract developers and all this other stuff. You can put a bulk of your resources into building out great engaging experiences for your audience, as opposed to focus on the blockchain. And so Aptos Build is something we're extremely excited about. It's already kind of available in the early form. There's much of the functionality is there, but there'll be much more coming throughout the rest of the year and beyond.
That's great. I love that. There's things that I want to test out and do, but I'm waiting for like a GUI interface that I can easily do it because I'm not a coder or anything like that or a
Yeah.
developer.
Yeah, so I think that's the goal as well, to make things much more accessible, even to a wide range of people just wanting to play around with the blockchain and try to test things out. So you're definitely the target audience. The other thing that's exciting about us that we're working on is kind of things we can talk about. Of course, is we've announced at Aptos Experience a couple of new technology efforts that we're pumped about.
Mm.
We have Raptor, which is the new consensus protocol, um, being rolled out throughout 2024 and beyond. Raptor is going maybe just a brief history of consensus protocols. There's PBFT that was kind of from 1999, defined kind of the optimal latency possible in consensus. We've achieved that earlier this year. We're really proud of that, obviously. But it's not just about achieving the optimal latency. It's about how do we now make sure we shrink that entire user latency to as close as we can to get the optimal latency as possible.
Mm.
And we're going to be using Raptor to do that. It's going to actually support a lot of the unstructured world of the internet much better to handle kind of downtime from nodes, while achieving those high throughputs and extreme low latency. So there's major rollouts going to take place with that. We expect to see latency decrease, throughput go up, and kind of pushing us even beyond where we are as class, leading to the next stage of that. There's also the work on block STM v2. Block STM, kind of the original protocol, is something that we're really proud launched with Aptos from day one. It's something that really defined us and made us unique from other networks. It is a form of dynamic parallelism. So if you have the history of parallelism in the space, you have kind of the sequential execution, executing transactions one by one with Ethereum. You have the static parallelism, which networks like Solana do, which you can define dependencies up front and kind of put more onus on the programmer, and the system uses those dependencies to then schedule transactions as concurrently as it can. And you have kind of this third wave of parallelism, which we call dynamic parallelism, which can use those techniques, but additionally has a runtime component. That runtime component means that you don't have to specify anything.
Mm.
Well, the system will try to figure out for you what to run in parallel and take care of that all in the back end.
Mm.
And that dynamic parallelism allows more concurrency in many cases. And so what we've seen and we've been excited about is people have been kind of quick to adopt even block STM in their technology stacks. We've seen it with Polygon, with Starknet, with Say, and even I think Monad, and many others. And so block STM v2 is going to be the next iteration of that, solving the ability to scale to many cores in a machine. And we see the trend, hardware trend is going to be many more cores on a validator. That's just the kind of way that Moore's law is progressing, and it's been going that way for a little while. So going from commodity machine having, say, 32 cores today, going up to 64, 128 core, 256 cores, we want to take advantage of that all that hardware. And Block STM v2 is designed specifically to do that. The last area that we're really excited about from an infrastructure standpoint is Move 2. I think I talked about some of the highlights there, but
Sure.
we want to build something that is kind of almost the end game for Web3 developers.
Mm.
It's definitely a challenge for Web3 developers today, compared to the traditional programming they're used to. And if you code in Rust, or if you code in C++ or C or Java, or these kind of traditional languages, you have so many tools available to you. You have so much functionality available to you. The language itself has evolved to support what programmers need in terms of data structures, in terms of programming interfaces. And so Move 2 is designed to kind of be that really accessible, but yet safe and secure and performant Web3 development environment for you. It will include things like dynamic dispatch that is safe. It will make sure we support the formal verification that ensures an additional layer of safety on top of your protocols. We're building out a VM that will rival, all the modern, VMs that exist in the current internet world.
Mm.
And all these things will add up to something I think that's going to be a true delight for Web3 developers to code with.
Wow, Avery, you guys got a lot of a full plate on your roadmap, but that's exciting, and I definitely want to have you back on as these things go to live and production and so forth. Really excited about that Hong Kong stablecoin on Aptos. That really piques my interest. But I know we're running up on time, so let's hit some wrap up questions here.
Let's do
First,
it.
if you could create your own metaverse, what would the theme be?
Oh gosh. Um, Honestly, I feel like Web3 can be that next version of the metaverse, or like a very strong base for it. I would love to see, yeah, Aptos become that.
Mm. And rapid fire questions. Favorite food,
Ooh, Japanese.
favorite musician or band,
Oh, I'll just say 90s rap.
favorite movie,
Ooh, tough one. Right now, Interstellar, probably.
favorite book.
Oh my gosh, I haven't read a book in a long time. I'll skip that one.
Um, and when you're not working at Aptos, what are you doing for fun?
Oh, Aptos is the fun for me. I'm
Spoken
spending
like
time
a
with my
true entrepreneur and developer,
yeah. Um, it's time with my kids and my wife.
for sure. Um, Avery, like I said, I gotta have you back on. I'm really excited about the stuff you guys are working on. But thank you so much for joining me.
It's my pleasure, Tony.